Okay, great. Yeah, thank you guys for having me here. I was in this class last year, and I really enjoyed it. I'm going to be presenting this project that I made for the final proposal called Found Film Binder. Okay, so the log line of my project. I found a stranger's personal photo archive, and through clues in the photos, eventually found her. This documentary follows my process of discovering and interpreting her photos, finding her, then her rediscovery of the photos, in response to my interpretation. It's an interactive, living, collaborative documentary in the form of an Instagram page. Okay, so I bought the film binder for $2 on January 3rd, 2019, on a trip to Berkeley, when my friends took me to a secondhand art supplies store called Creative Reuse. I've built a small collection of other people's lost photo prints for a while now, but I've never been so fortunate as to find someone's personal archive of film negatives. There were handwritten captions on the negative sleeves that dated them: Ecuador 94, Mexico 96, Rockstar 97, Berlin 0102. There weren't any other markings that could indicate who the original owner or photographer was. I had no idea if the photographer was a parent or a professional or a woman or a man, and since all I had were the negatives, I couldn't even see the photos yet. When I got home from the trip, I began the slow, laborious process of scanning the negatives. There were hundreds of them, with dates spanning from 1993 to 2002. I expected to be scanning for the rest of the year. I started with the first few black and white pages that were loose out of the binder rings. I saw kids my age partying, hanging out, sitting next to each other on a plane, pushing each other around in shopping carts. They reminded me a lot of me and my friends. I wanted to show the photos to my friends, and I knew that having other eyes in the photos would motivate me to scan more. So I created an Instagram page for the photos, @FoundFilmBinder, where I would post photos from the binder while I scanned them. I didn't post all the photos, just the ones I liked, and those that offered clues to who the photographer was. My captions documented my process of trying to piece together the clues. Instantly, finding Vivian Maier sprung to mind, but I was trying to avoid making it something like that, making a big deal out of it. I wasn't trying to argue for these photos' place in photo history. I was interested in seeing another person's life at a similar stage as I am in right now, and the stories that could be read solely through the photos they left behind. And then this is my Instagram story post when I first made the page. In the early posts, I was busy trying to figure out who the photographer was. At first, I pinned down this guy from Ecuador 93 and Rockstar 97. You can see the captions. I have a feeling that this guy is the photographer. I think the guy on the left is the photographer. The shirt reveals why the photographer spent time in Ecuador, and it says Amigos de las Americas. Amigos de las Americas, or Amigos, is a nonprofit organization based in Houston, Texas, with 25 chapters across the USA. And basically it was a charity organization that does these outreach programs in South America and Central America. And then you can see I've been less certain about the identity of the photographer. Haven't seen any photos of the dude I suspected to be the photographer in the Guanajuato photos. Maybe he's just been behind the camera the whole time? I'm not sure. There was one girl who kept appearing on nearly every roll I scanned. I'd been struggling to incorporate her into each narrative about the photographer. Then I saw her holding a camera in some photos, and it suddenly became obvious that she had been the photographer all along. The photos that she was in were just times where she had passed the camera to somebody else momentarily. This girl has appeared on nearly every roll of film I've scanned so far, from 92 to 97, in Mexico, SF, and Ecuador. She's the only consistency throughout. The earliest photos of her were definitely in high school. I'm trying to guess her relationship to the photographer. Best friend? Lover? Sister? Now I'm thinking she may be the photographer all along, a photographer who hands the camera off to her friends a lot. I saw two narratives forming on the Instagram. One was about her life, and one was about me and my process of trying to figure out her life based on her photos. This photo, her home state, siblings. Girl on the left is named Jamie. And this one, OMG, first time seeing her with a boy. I haven't seen him in any other photos, but he seems like another another teen in the outreach program. So I was very invested in her personal life. After 3 weeks, I scanned a photo of her wearing a name tag. It said April. Pretty soon after that, I was able to find her on social media. I wanted to reach out to her, but it took me a few weeks to figure out what I wanted to say. In the meantime, I kept scanning and finished the rest of the film in the binder. The scanned images totaled 1,176. I stopped uploading to the page after I found April. I felt uncomfortable posting after I knew who she was. Once she became a real person, it felt like I needed her permission. People are asking how I found her. This was the critical image. They're wearing name tags and hers says April. Once I found her first name, I was simply able to search her up under the followers list of the Instagram page of Amigos and find her IG. I've scanned over 1,000 images now, and this is the only one that gave me the clue. Now that I know her identity, posting here somehow feels different. And even though I've shared the most private details of her life on this page, I don't feel comfortable linking to her page. I haven't reached out to her yet. I decided to wait until I finished scanning all the film. I was actively thinking about how to create a documentary project about the film binder, since I was in a documentary film class at the time. This class. I had to write drafts of documentary proposals for the class before I had gotten in contact with April. I wanted to make some sort of documentary with her, and I wanted it to be collaborative. I wanted to reach out and see how she responded, and decide what to do from there. In my drafts, I was considering all the ways I could make a documentary film out of the source material that was static in its nature, writing. I thought about telling the story about me finding the film binder and scanning the photos and discovering clues in the photos, but I didn't know how to do that because I didn't have a film crew there to document the process as it was unfolding. I wondered where else the story was in all of this. Maybe the story was about the inadequacies of the photo album as a narrative of her personal life. I considered a video in which each of us would give a commentary to a selection of photos while stringing a narrative between them. I would go first, delivering the narrative I constructed about April, and she would go next, giving the real story. And these are 2 copies of the drafts. I finally emailed April, and after a week I got no response. I assumed she wasn't so interested. I didn't want to push her to participate in something she wasn't enthusiastic about. So I drafted a second documentary proposal, shifting focus to the events in my own life, which coincided with the scanning of the film and discovering her. I chose to break out of the medium of film in the second proposal. It seemed like a story better read than watched. My idea was a collection of digital documents, texts, emails, the Instagram posts, sequenced to make a documentary about my interest in April's photos, and struggling to make a documentary about them. Then, the next week, I received an email from April. Hope you are well. I'm wondering if you received the audio messages I sent. It was such a surprise to receive the email, and I wasn't in a place to type a response then. Hopefully you did. If not, I can resend if not. I had not received the audio messages. She resent them. 2 6-minute voice memos. She was enthusiastic. I was relieved. She's 41 now with a family. She told me she had donated the film binder to creative reuse herself. She spoke about releasing the weight of memories as you grow older. I sent her an audio message back, and she sent another one. In my next email, I finally told her about the Instagram page, and that I was interested in making a documentary project with her, if she was interested too. She followed the Instagram page and went through the photos and responded to my captions, rediscovering the photos and reflecting on the memories they brought up. This photo, so interesting to imagine your thought process, trying to pick up on clues, who is who and how are they related, what is the relationship. I asked myself that too. The guy in the photo was named Zach. We didn't get along very well. I think he had a hard time that summer, and I was not my most understanding, compassionate self with him. I think he was from Texas. I remember calling him when we all returned home to apologize, and he said he didn't remember me, and that was that. This photo of these rice fields. This is the rice field I walked by every week on my route. I feel like I can transport myself there just seeing this photo. When I was in the Dominican Republic, I was responsible for visiting 4 communities of volunteers, or VOLs, living with host families. The walk was about 2 to 3 miles, and I would hardly ever see anyone on the path. The feeling from the land was so powerful. This view and the solitude clears the mind. There was plenty of drama going on. I can appreciate the peace this brought to me at the time. I posted on the page again, letting followers know about my contact with April and her new presence on the page. I tried to draw attention to the comments she had left on old photos. Tapping back in, April and I have connected, and she has begun contributing her commentary to the posts here. You can go back through the old posts and find her comments. She writes, fuck. Okay. Yeah, and then you can this right here. I reposted her comment that she left on the rice field photo. April's comments made me reconsider the documentary approach again. I came to a similar realization as the one I came to before, when I realized the girl who had appeared on every roll had been the photographer all along. The answer was once again in plain sight. The documentary I had been searching so hard to find was right in front of me all along. The Instagram page itself could be the documentary. It already documented my discovery of April, and with her commentary, it documented her rediscovery of the photos and the strange relationship we had. I saw three narratives laying over each other on the page. The first narrative was about April's life, told through the photos. The second narrative was about my discovery and interpretation of her life through the photos, operating through my captions, narrativization, and curation of the photos. The third narrative was about April's rediscovery and response in our dialogue, operating through her comments on the posts in response to me and the photos. In other words, there were three stories which could be read simultaneously on the Instagram. The first story is about April, the second story is about me, and the third story is about April and me. This is another post, which was a series of images that I noticed. This recurring image of bottles sitting on windowsills. It's not that important. In my second draft proposal, I was considering using the personal conversations I had about the film binder as part of the final project, writing, "A lot more is documented now, not just because of digital cameras, but because of digital communication. Every text conversation is documented, if privately. We're so accustomed to communicating in these ways that we can forget about the fact that our words leave behind a document preserved indefinitely. I was finally liberated when I started considering the possibility of making a documentary that wasn't in video form. I had so much material already documented in order to tell the story in the form of private text conversations with my friends about the photos and email correspondence with April. I want to use these documents to make a documentary that is meant to be read instead of watched. I'm thinking about book form, digital or physical. I want to sort of mimic my experience discovering April through her private documentation by leaving my own private documentation in the form of text messages and my digital archiving of April's files and public documentation in the form of Instagram posts, emails, etc. Looking back on this now, it marks a sort of dead end within my process of the project. Realizing that all my contact with April was documented through the emails, audio messages, and direct messages, it was tempting to use that material as part of the final project. I ultimately decided against that, upholding the separation between the private side of the project, which was my personal correspondence with April, and the public side, which was the Instagram page. April and I were going to try and see and feel out this new documentary concept. I let followers know that I was resuming the page where I left off in the scans, requesting April's commentary wherever she felt compelled. So now that the documentary is living, we will contribute to it when we can. She hasn't seen the rest of the photo files yet, so her comments are still her first reactions. It is liable to change or stop if either of us want it to. It is still a private page, and I'm thinking about keeping it private for the time being. The audience is small, and it feels better that we're speaking to a small room rather than a large crowd. Most of the audience has been following since the beginning, so the expository stage of the story happened in real time. I don't feel I have to justify the importance or relevance of this one person's story to them since they already have a certain investment in April's photos. I also hope that it will stimulate conversation between followers and April. Almost all the followers are within the age range April was during the years of the film binder. People can participate simply by liking a photo or commenting and engaging in the dialogue themselves. April's comment about this photo from Dominican Republic 1997 reflects on putting photo slides in order in the carousel to tell a story and holding them up to the light to reveal their image, which seems like a metaphor for what I've been trying to do with the Instagram page. Jamie Barron said, in The Archive Effect, that the active sequentiation of documents that generates interpretive meaning that is fundamental to both documentary as it is edited and history as it is written. Handling April's film photos, primary documents, and posting them to Instagram historicizes them. This process of narration, sequentiation, and interpretation, which Barron calls the modern historiographic project, is what makes Found Film Binder a documentary. Heather and her dad. I'm going to send her this picture on Facebook, putting slides in order in the carousel to tell a story, holding them up to the light to reveal her image. I must have taken a roll of slides, making peace with things that no longer exist, questions about how to be in relationship with the past when it resurfaces, always from a new perspective. Her dad looks young to me now, that I'm probably the age he was in this photo. I can feel how nostalgia has a strong undertow, looking at something that no longer exists. In a long-winded, unsent email to April, I wrote, There's so many things, important things that happen in my life that go undocumented. I knew that I shouldn't be misled to read your film binder as an autobiography. You weren't trying to document your life for an outsider. You were communicating it to your future self. Most of the earlier photos were taken on trips, and I didn't get much of a sense of what your life was like in between the trips. At home, your normal everyday life was not often documented, photographed. The camera is usually taken out for events or special outings. I wonder if you would have identified as a photographer during these years. I wondered if these photos just seemed special to me because I wasn't alive during this time, and that everyone just photographed their lives like this. I'm sure if you checked the average person's camera roll today, you'd find similar sorts of photographs anyway. Except the social media, I feel like the average person is more aware of who they're communicating to when they take a photo. I feel like many of the photos people in my generation take, myself included, are taken with some intention to eventually post on social media or send to friends. And this affects our intuition when we take photos, when we pose for photos, and when we look at photos. And maybe this is why your photos feel very different from the ones the average person takes today. I felt that my relationship with self-documentation was very different from April's in the 1990s. Social media completely changed people's relationships to public self-documentation. How we document our lives and represent ourselves online has a lot to do with our own sense of identity. I've grown up with my online presence, with the constant process of defining myself in a lasting online archive. A lot more is documented now, not just because of digital cameras, but because of digital communication. Every text conversation is documented, if privately. We're so accustomed to communicating in these ways that we can forget about the fact that our words leave behind a document, preserved indefinitely. My entire perception of April was based on her self-documentation, from the photographs of her youth to her on social media now. Her self-documentation was all I had, which could make my perception of her entirely skewed. These are two different kinds of self-documentation, private and public. I had to reconcile April's private self-documentation from her youth with the public self-documentation she does today on social media for thousands of followers. Both offered me entirely different kinds of information about her. And this was like right when I first emailed her. She reposted one of the photos to her own Instagram page with this long caption. It kind of tells you about some of the things that she's interested in now. Exploring the relationship with solar and lunar energy. Light has so many different qualities, fire and nectar, bright and subtle. This black and white photo feels like it's from another lifetime. It arrived to me through some serious cosmic serendipity on the full moon. Trying to place my age, I noticed a brace around my arm and waist, so it must be right after my shoulder surgery at 18 years old, from all the swimming, from all the dislocations, swimming, water polo, and skateboarding. I think those injuries were my body telling me you don't have to prove anything about your worth physically. I wanted to be one of the boys, to keep up a competitive solar way. One year I was even chosen to be Solar Man, the mascot of my swim team. In his essay, Plotting the Database, Will Lewis said, "Sharing photos and videos with friends on Facebook is an act that combines database and narrative logics. Before social media, friends shared photo prints and videos, but they often did so as ritualistic forms of linear storytelling, and narrators addressing an attentive audience. Now, online friends post tagged sets of travel photos to social networks, often as events happen, and hope for conversations to start. While both methods speak of the desire to shape and communicate experience, the former uses media as an illustration and mnemonic device for linear storytelling, and the latter presents media as an interface to the unfolding story of experience itself. The project is as much about my experience of digging through the archive as it is about the photos themselves. Accordingly, the experience of the viewer, clicking and tapping around on the photos, is similar to my experience first discovering and exploring the film binder. In a similar sense, April's experience navigating my post on the Instagram page echoes my experience navigating a film binder. The viewer must peruse the Instagram page to read the story. The narrative is not told linearly, but rather interactively, through the viewer's chosen path through the Instagram page, which is itself an archive of my curation and narration. I have no idea if that made sense. The archive of her original film binder is filtered through my own subjective lens and presented again as an archive on the Instagram page, but with my captions of interpretation. The experience of navigating and extracting documents from an archive in order to construct a story reveals a narrative undergirded with my own subjectivity. In recognition of this subjectivity, it is only appropriate that the viewer navigates the second-generation database I've created with the Instagram page. This database narrative structure allows for alternative stories and encourages us to question the choice of categories and what is included and omitted. It is a living, interactive documentary of modest scale and aspirations, rare for the scope, or for the genre of interactive documentary, the pitfall for most being their overambitious scope. The work being presented as an Instagram page is an approachable interface that the viewer will already be familiar with and know how to use. This also solves another problem with interactive storytelling, or with interactive documentary, the problem of getting people to engage with an unfamiliar interface for storytelling. And that was the end of my presentation as I made it for my final project for this class last year. And but the film binder project continued for a bit after this, and so I added an epilogue. I submitted that presentation of Found Film Binder as my final project for my documentary film class on March 12, 2019. The next day I received this email from my professor, Kristy. "Hello, Nico. I was really intrigued by your proposal and will be sharing it with the class. I wanted to tell you that, in an odd turn of events, I know April. We have children. We have children of similar age, and we're in a child care share together since before I moved to LA. It was a wonderful. It was a wonderful coincidence. The page continued on for another month after that until on April 11th, April emailed me and asked me to take down the page and send her back the film binder. The email was abrupt and worried me. Did I do something wrong? Had I not been sensitive enough? I took down all the posts and wrote back to her. At the end I asked, can this death at least have a funeral? As in, can I give the IG page, and thus the project, some closure? She came up with an idea to leave the page with some closure. Both of us take pictures of ourselves holding the binder, me before I send it, and her when she receives it, and write a caption about our learnings from the experience. I sent her the binder, along with a flash drive of all the image files. April asked me to take down this page and send her the binder. Thank you everyone for following, and thank you April for participating. Bittersweet to see it go. It has been such an exciting and informative process for me, and I'm glad I was able to share it with all 91 of you. Its death is maybe the most informative part of all. I'm grateful for April's generous speaking and listening. Our main form of communication over these past weeks has been audio messages. We haven't talked on the phone, just through the voice memos sent over email. I think this allowed both of us a necessary degree of separation in order to personally reflect on self-documentation, on seeing yourself, being seen by others, on memory, and accepting the death of things in the past. This is continued in the same post. Thinking a lot about the thin black lines between frames on a film strip and the time represented in them. The lines all look the same, yet all represent a different amount of time passed, sometimes seconds, sometimes months. I think this page was a lot about those black lines and trying to imagine or speculate what went on in that unrepresented, unknowable time. I asked April about closure, and she suggested ending it with pics of us holding the binder. I got the cashier at the post office to take my picture. And this is her post. Thank you for witnessing this pop-up documentary of moments in time that were going to be buried, but instead Nico found them and brought them back to life. A new life, with new light, new perspective through new eyes. The found film binder was like a boomerang, a time capsule, a Pandora's box that resurfaced as a teacher for both of us. For this I'm so grateful. Why did I let go of this binder in the first place? I didn't know what to do with all the weight of the memories that were taking up space physically and emotionally. I didn't want to throw them away either. Some things get donated to science to study after they die. I guess this was donated to art for a similar reason, to make some meaning after the fact. Some of those images I had never seen printed. Others I had tried to erase completely. Some I did not even want to revisit in a public way. This project was a container for exploration and self-reflection, and ultimately forgiveness and acceptance. Nothing is created or destroyed. It just changes form. Through this process, I realized that I needed these memories to change form. So I decided to shred them, to liberate the energy that was feeling stuck. I wasn't ready to do this the first time around, and now after seeing them again, I can. Maybe I will regret it. But I trust that whatever is in the past that needs to be revisited for healing and growth will continue to resurface. Through my exchanges with Nico, I thought a lot about the physicalness of film, the waiting period for development, the memory of buying a roll of film with 24 or 36 pictures. There's a finite number. Now things appear limitless, except we pay for memory, storage. One image can exist simultaneously all over the world to be shared and liked in a non-physical reality that seems real. These negatives were confined to a box. And then by letting them go, they took on a life of their own. Every time a memory is remembered, it changes the memory. Brain, science, continued. And that's the flash drive I sent her with all the image files. The one black and white of me on the railroad tracks took my breath away. Who was that girl? I wanted to talk to her, to call back parts of myself, the wild nature, the independent nature. When Nico sent me this one, I recalled all the things I didn't know were still part of me. It was like a visit from an old friend after almost 20 years, and I have no idea who actually took the photo. Some relationships need to die. Some will regenerate into new forms. In social media, they accumulate as if that is a good thing. Who do I truly know? Who truly knows me? There's no single narrative, multiple narratives. Each picture is complete in itself and at the same time only a tiny part of the story. Any one of the photos could be captioned in 1,000 ways. This whole process made me question, what are the narratives I tell myself about my life? I imagine for Nico, they were all pieces of an incomplete puzzle. Who are these people, and what is their relationship to each other? Where are they now? What else happened that didn't get captured on film? Comfort with the unknown. I appreciated being included in this process. The end is also the beginning. April. And what remains now of the public form of found film binder is just these two posts. And that's it.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you for...
I want to have a little bit of time for responses and any questions that you may have. For me, I thought it was, talking about documentary form and being innovative. It was a really compelling project and proposal just in terms of seeing if there is an Instagram documentary, what would that look like? What would that be? Thoughts? Questions?
So did you already have the binder when the idea for when you joined the class, or did you just happen to find the binder and then it kind of developed into something that you could realize you could use for the class?
Yeah, I got the binder on the last day of winter break, so it was the day before this class started. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to compliment the project. I thought it was really cool and really sensible as well. So it really touched me. I wish I could have followed.
Thank you. And also, I wanted to mention that I I asked April about presenting it like this, and she gave me her blessing. But yeah.
Why did she ask to take it down?
I think a lot of reasons. I think she talks about a few of them in the in her last post, but I think like it was just overwhelming to like confront these memories or be asked to in like such a public way, and also I think like seeing these photos of people that she hasn't talked to in like 30 years, and like knowing that they're online in this like new form that she kind of felt responsible for, but like they didn't give their permission for, and so feeling a bit like sensitive about that. But I'm sure there are other reasons too. But at first I was like, oh, like I thought it was like a really bad reason, or like I had like broken her trust or something.
What was the length of time where she was actually commenting, like you were both commenting?
It was only about like 3 or 4 weeks, I think. And or like maybe 5 weeks, because it continued for a month after I made this the first presentation. Yeah.
What do you feel like is the most important thing that you got out of the experience of making this?
I think at the beginning, the questions I was asking were like, or the questions I wanted to know the answers to were like, who are all these people in the photos, and what was like actually going on in between each photo, and like what's the actual story here? And I think like at the end, I only got through like a third of the film binder like on the Instagram page, and so I only heard like April respond to like a third of the photos, and I think what became more important than the photos was the like process of like working with somebody's own like personal documents and like trying to make something with them and like make it collaborative but like respectful at the same time. And it was hard, and I think that I could still look back at things that I maybe didn't, I sort of insensitive about, or like I showed without everyone's permission. But I think that the process of like consent and like and collaboration was like the most important learning for me.
Kind of going off of that, like after this project, how has your social media or just like documentary memories changed, or has it changed at all?
How's my view of social media and documentary changed?
Yeah.
Well, I definitely see how like social media forms these like personal documentaries of our own lives that we're constantly like updating and that we're always experiencing in real time, which is like what I thought was like the interesting part of using this form, is that it was an ongoing thing rather than like a final form that was consumed once. And I think like experiencing a story over time, in real time, is like really interesting and makes you like more invested in the story. I don't know if that answers your question.
I was also just really interested in this idea of audience, because you had a very, in some ways, small audience of 91. It was,
Yeah.
and I remember us talking a little bit about, in the class also, wanting to have a bigger audience still when it was kind of a living thing, living documentary. And you felt very strongly that you wanted the original audience of the Instagram page to be the total number of people that would be involved in it as it was unfolding. I thought that was kind of an interesting question for us.
Yeah, because I think there's this impulse to like make something that's as universal or as like successful as possible. And once you like release that mentality, I think you can make something a lot more like engaged on a personal level, and also something a lot more realistic to who I was, like, and who the audience around it was, and like taking advantage of that rather than like aspiring to something more, but just like being honest about the fact that it was like just my friends watching, and April, and but then when it ended, I think it was sort of like like that's it, like like there aren't going to be any more people, like especially when I deleted everything. It was like you had to be there for it, or else like you're not going to be able to, like, this project doesn't exist for anybody else. And it hasn't found a new form until right now. It's only been this like sort of ephemeral project since then, and I think that's something that like I've struggled with, but like it's been challenging, but like a real learning experience for me to like be okay with that, and not like it's hard to even like tell the story about the whole thing to somebody, like to a friend, because there's so many different layers, and it's hard to tell it without the like visual documents of it. But I think, I mean, it was such an interesting experience for me that I thought was like worth retelling in some form, and it was a shame that it like could only exist to those people for that set amount of time. So I think this is like another way of sort of like of not reviving the project, but like giving it a final resting form as a presentation rather than the Instagram page.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.